She had spent 30 years making herself invisible, and it had worked perfectly on everyone except the one man in the hall who had been looking for her. The chandeliers were dimmed to amber. The stage smelled of beeswax and old wood, and the particular silence of 2,000 empty seats. She was standing beside the Bursendorfer with one hand resting on the lid, not performing anything, not asking for anything when the name came. Not her name, not yet. First his voice. A Swiss patron, 78 years old, with a careful silver mustache and eyes that had gone wet the moment he stepped through the door. His hand was pressed flat against his mouth, the way a man holds something in that has been held in for a very long time. Then Heinrich, do you know who you have just dismissed? And then her name, 3 syllables, long asterisk a asterisk, open, moving through the 1869 acoustic the way smoke moves on a still night. In the third row, a journalist lowered her camera to her hip. She did not raise it. She understood, without being told, that whatever happened next was going to find its own angle. Clara's hand was still on the piano lid. She had not yet turned toward the bench. But the story of how Albrecht found her, and what she chose to do with being found, begins the night before, at 1 in the morning, in this same hall which did not yet know what it was about to hear. The other cleaners were upstairs in the dressing rooms. Magda and Petra, the Hungarian sisters, would be working their way down through the corridors in roughly 15 minutes. Clara had timed it for years. 15 minutes was exactly enough. Enough for what? She had never asked herself directly. She finished the lid. Moved to the keys. The Bursendorfer had 97 keys instead of the standard 88. 9 extra in the base, black where the other lows were white, like a row of dark teeth at the bottom of a familiar smile. Clara worked from the highest C downward, lifting each key cover with the tip of her cloth, polishing the ivory, lowering it again. She had never used a single one of the piano cleaner products the supply room offered. A soft cloth, a whisper of beeswax on the wood, never the keys. The keys took only her breath and the side of her thumb. The lead pianist for tomorrow's gala, a young man named Friedrich something, she could never remember his last name, had complained twice this week about the middle C sticking. Clara had heard him. She had not said anything. What she had done, last Tuesday at this same hour, was sit down at the bench and press the middle C herself, just to listen to where the resistance was. There was a small dent on the side of the key, the size of a thumbnail. Older than Friedrich, older than the maestro who was conducting tomorrow, possibly older than Clara herself. She had felt it under her finger and known, without being told, exactly what kind of strike had made it. A ring. A heavy ring on the wrong finger of a player who had been angry about something else. Pianos remembered everything. She had repaired the felt herself, quietly. In the half hour she always had between her real work and the sisters coming down. No one had asked. No one would ever know. Clara polished the last key, closed the cover gently, stood back. The framed black and white photograph on the wall behind her had been there since the renovation in 1991. She had never looked directly at it. She did not look at it now. She knew without looking that the woman in the photograph was 28 years old, holding a gold medal, and laughing at something her husband had said just out of frame. Clara should have left. The sisters would be down in 9 minutes. Her coat was hanging in the basement, her keys in the pocket. The tram home was at 1:42. Instead, she sat down. She did not know why. Or she knew why, the way you know the cause of an ache you've stopped naming. She wanted to test the middle C, to make sure the repair had held. She told herself that, sitting there. She almost believed it. Her right hand floated up over the keyboard, hovered, did not land. She had not played in front of another human being in 29 years. She had played alone, sometimes, in the apartment, on the second-hand upright Stefan had bought her the year before he died. But not on a stage. Not on a Bersendorfer. Not on this Bersendorfer, which her recording from 1986 had, she happened to know, though no one at the opera house would ever guess she knew, been used to standardize the tuning during the last renovation. Her hand came down. The opening 8 bars of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor moved out of the piano and into the empty hall the way smoke moves out of a chimney on a still night. Not loud. Not for anyone. Just enough to know that the middle C was holding. She heard the side door swing open before the last note finished. Maestro Heinrich Vosburg was 62 years old, and he had been told by his mother at the age of 7 that his face was made for displeasure. He had spent 55 years confirming the diagnosis. He came through the orchestra-level door in full tails, because tomorrow was tails, and because rehearsing in tails was, he often said, the only way to know whether the audience would be able to see him sweat. Behind him, 3 people. A Swiss man in his late 70s with a careful silver mustache and very kind eyes. 2 journalists, one with a small camera already in her hand, the other holding a recorder. And, trailing them all, the lead pianist Friedrich something, holding a glass of wine he had not been offered. Vosburg stopped halfway down the center aisle. His eyes found Clara at the piano, the hand resting still on the keys, the gray uniform, the cloth in her apron pocket. He inhaled in a way that the journalists had been hoping he would inhale all evening. "Get," he said, "your filthy hands off that piano." The acoustic of the empty Vienna State Opera House did to his voice exactly what it had been built, in 1869, to do. The words arrived in the back row before Clara had time to lower her hand from the keyboard. She lowered it slowly. She did not stand. The Swiss patron, 20 feet behind the maestro, took a small step forward and stopped. His eyes had moved from Clara's face to the photograph on the wall behind her, and then back to her face. He was very still. "I asked you a question," Vosburg said, although he had not asked a question. He had given an instruction. The distinction, Clara noticed, did not seem to bother him. She slid out from the piano bench. She did not hurry. She had learned, decades ago, that hurrying in front of men like Heinrich Vosburg only confirmed the thing they had already decided about you. "I was testing the middle C," she said, quietly. In German, because his German was better than his English, and she did not want to humiliate him by accident on top of everything else. It was sticking. Friedrich mentioned it twice this week. Friedrich, hearing his own name, took a half-step backward into the shadows. "You were testing, Vosburg said." The word came out of him, the way you would say a piece of food you had found in your shoe. "You were testing the middle C. On a Bersendorfer that cost more than your entire bloodline. With a cleaning rag still in your pocket." He moved closer. Clara stayed where she was, beside the piano, her hand still resting on the side of the lid, the way it had been resting when she was alone, because she had not yet decided to remove it. The Swiss patron, Clara was now allowing herself, briefly, to glance at him, had his right hand pressed flat against his mouth. His eyes were wet. She did not know him. She had never seen him before in her life. "Heinrich," the patron said. His voice was so quiet that the journalist with the recorder had to lift it slightly. "Heinrich, perhaps what Albrecht." Perhaps we should let the help play recitals in their off hours. Perhaps we should let the asterisk char, ladies asterisk dream above their station. Vosburg turned toward the journalists. The journalists, who had been hoping for exactly this, raised their devices in unison. Write that down. Write it precisely. Asterisk this asterisk is what happens when we let the help dream above their station. This is what the modern opera house has become. Friedrich laughed. It was a small laugh, the kind a man makes when he has decided which side of the room he wants to be standing on and wants the maestro to notice him standing there. The laugh hung in the air a moment too long because no one else joined it. Vosburg's hand closed around Clara's upper arm. Not hard enough to hurt. Hard enough to be a hand on her arm. He pulled her not forcefully, but pointedly, away from the piano, 2 steps, 3, until she was standing in the open between the orchestra pit and the front row. The cloth fell out of her apron pocket onto the polished stage floor. "You are dismissed," he said. "Effective immediately. Collect your belongings. Do not return to this building." Clara looked down at the cloth on the floor. She did not pick it up. She did not yet look at him. She knew exactly what she could do in this moment. She could say her name. 3 syllables. Asterisk Clara Werner. Asterisk the name was painted in gold leaf on a small plaque inside the conservatory, wing 2 streets away, beside a photograph of a young woman receiving a medal from a Russian official in 1986. The name was on the inside cover of every standard Rachmaninoff edition, published in German since 1989, because her interpretation of the Third Concerto was the one the editors had chosen as the reference performance. The name was the reason the Bersendorfer behind her sounded the way it sounded, because the man who had tuned it for the last renovation had calibrated the action against her 1986 recording and never bothered to tell anyone. 3 syllables. She could end Heinrich Vosburg's career in 3 syllables. She did not say them. She looked down at the cloth on the stage floor and what she was thinking about, and the woman of 65 watching this would understand it before anyone in the room with Clara understood it, was Stefan. It had been Stefan who had cried after the Tchaikovsky, not her. Stefan, sitting in the 3rd row, with both hands pressed over his face, crying so hard the woman beside him had given him her handkerchief. Clara had walked off that stage in Moscow and into his arms, and he had said the only sentence he ever said about her playing, the only one in 12 years of marriage, asterisk, "You give them something they don't deserve, and they will never know." Asterisk, he had said it laughing. Through tears. As a joke. As a not joke. 3 weeks later he was dead, aneurysm. 41 years old. A Tuesday morning. He had been making her coffee. She had stopped playing publicly the week after the funeral. Not because she had decided to. Because she had sat down at her piano on a Thursday afternoon and discovered that the sound of her own hands hitting the keys, in a world where Stefan was not going to come into the room and listen, was unbearable. So she had stopped. And then 30 years had passed. She was not, Clara realized, standing on the stage with a celebrity conductor's handprint fading on her upper arm, going to give Heinrich Vosburg the satisfaction of being the man who made her start again. She bent down, picked up her cloth, put it back in her apron pocket. She turned to leave. She made it 4 steps before the Swiss patron said her name, Clara. She stopped. It had been a long time since anyone in this building had said her first name. Magda and Petri called her asterisk Frau Werner asterisk because they were old-fashioned and because she had never invited the closeness. The day shift manager called her asterisk Clara asterisk, but pronounced it wrong, flat, German-Austrian, the asterisk a asterisk short. The Swiss patron said it the way Stefan had said it, long asterisk a asterisk, open. The way her mother had said it. The way no one had said it in 30 years. She turned around slowly. The Swiss patron, Albrecht, Vosberg had called him, was standing in front of the photograph now. He had moved while she was thinking about Stefan. He was looking at the photograph with his hand still over his mouth, the way you look at a person you have spent a long time missing. He turned and looked at her. "Clara," he said, "er is you. I thought I have thought for an hour that I was being foolish, that I was seeing a resemblance. But it is you." Vosberg was watching this with the face of a man whose Tuesday is being interrupted by something he does not yet understand to be Wednesday. "Albrecht," Vosberg said. "Albrecht, what are you, Heinrich?" The Swiss patron did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Heinrich, do you know who you have just dismissed?" "I have dismissed a asterisk cleaning lady asterisk who." "You have dismissed," Albrecht said, "Clara Werner." The name landed in the empty hall, the way Clara's 8 bars of Rachmaninoff had landed earlier. The acoustic of 1869 carried it. The journalist with the recorder turned her recorder slightly, as if the room itself had spoken, and she wanted to make sure she got it. Vosberg said. "I do not. The 1986 T. Tchaikovsky gold medalist." Albrecht's voice was very gentle now. He was not speaking to Vosberg. He was speaking to Clara. He was telling her, in front of the journalists, that he knew. That she did not have to say it. That he would say it for her. The woman whose Rachmaninoff recording is the audition standard for your orchestra, Heinrich. The woman whose interpretation of the prelude in C-sharp minor, the piece she just played for you on this piano, has been studied at the Vienna Conservatory for 30 years. He turned and looked at Vosberg fully for the first time. "You have just," he said, "fired asterisk Clara Werner asterisk." The journalist with the camera began filming. She did not raise the camera, obviously. She lowered it to her hip and let the lens find the angle on its own. Clara saw her do it. Clara did not stop her. Vosberg's mouth was open. Not in the snarl from earlier. In the way a man's mouth opens when something inside the architecture of his face has lost its support beam. He said. "Frau Werner. There has been I was not informed." Clara looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment. In that moment, and the viewer of 65 would feel this, would feel it in her own body, would lean forward slightly in her own kitchen or living room or wherever she was watching. Clara understood what was about to be asked of her. Albrecht was going to ask her to play. He would not say it. He was a Swiss patron of the arts, 78 years old, with a careful silver mustache and very kind eyes, and he was not the kind of man who asked things directly. He was the kind of man who created the conditions in which a woman could choose what she wanted to do. The conditions were these. The journalists were here. The piano was open. The story Albrecht had been waiting 30 years for the world to remember, was, right now, in this moment, rewriting itself in real time. If Clara walked out of the door behind her, the story would be asterisk maestro fires cleaning lady asterisk. A small scandal. A footnote. If Clara sat down at the Bersendorfer, the story would be something else. Stefan, she thought. Asterisk Stefan, what would you asterisk? She knew what he would say. She had known what he would say for 30 years. She had been pretending all that time not to know. Asterisk, you give them something they don't deserve, and they will never know. Asterisk, he had been laughing when he said it. Through tears. She turned back toward the piano. She did not look at Vosberg as she walked past him. She walked past him the way you walk past a man on the tram who has been speaking too loudly on his phone. She walked to the piano. She put her hand on the side of the lid. And this was the moment. This was the moment the viewer would remember tomorrow. This was the moment that a woman of 65 would mention to a friend on the phone. Clara hesitated, because her hands were shaking. She had not played in front of another human being since Stefan died. She had played alone for 30 years. The Börsendorfer was a concert instrument. The prelude was the prelude. The journalist's camera was on, and was going to stay on, and was going to broadcast whatever she did next. She had 30 years of not playing in her hands. She did not know, and the viewer with her did not know whether her hands were going to remember. She sat down. The bench was the wrong height. Friedrich was taller than she was. She adjusted it without thinking, 3 turns of the knob on the left side, and the small mechanical sound of the bench rising was, in the silence of the hall, the loudest thing. She placed her hands on the keys. She could not feel them. This was the dark moment, and the viewer of 65 would understand what was happening because she had felt this in her own body, in a different form, perhaps in a hospital corridor or a lawyer's office or a Sunday morning, when she had to walk into a room she did not want to walk into. The body, in moments of genuine consequence, sometimes refuses to be a body. The hands disappear. The breath disappears. There is a moment of pure, blank, animal terror, and the only thing on the other side of that moment is whatever you are made of underneath everything you have used to hide. Clara closed her eyes. She did not pray. She had stopped praying the Tuesday Stefan died. But she did, in the privacy of her closed eyes, say his name once. Stefan. The middle C key was under her right thumb. She could feel the tiny dent on the side of it, the one she had repaired the felt of last week, the one that nobody else in this building would ever know was there. The dent was in the shape of a thumbnail. It was, she realized. She had not let herself realize it until exactly this moment, almost exactly the shape of the small scar on Stefan's left hand, the one he had gotten cutting an apple for her on a Saturday morning in 1989. She had repaired the felt last week with her thumb on top of that dent. She had been touching her husband for an hour, and she had not let herself know it. Her hand stopped shaking. She opened her eyes. She did not look at the journalists. She did not look at Vosberg, who was standing exactly where she had left him, in the place a man stands when his entire understanding of his own importance has been quietly removed from underneath him. She did not look at Albrecht, who had begun, very quietly, to cry. She looked at the photograph on the wall behind the piano. The woman in the photograph was 28. She was holding a gold medal. She was laughing at something her husband had said just out of frame. You give them something they don't deserve. Stefan had said, and they will never know. Clara, 58, in a gray cleaning uniform, with a polishing cloth in her apron pocket, on the stage of the Vienna State Opera House at 1:15 in the morning, in front of 3 witnesses and a journalist's camera that was going to put her in 40 countries by sunrise. Clara smiled. It was not a performance smile. It was the smile of a woman who has just been told a private joke by her dead husband. She turned back to the keys. She began to play. She did not play the prelude. She played the centerpiece of tomorrow night's gala, Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 3, the second movement, the intermezzo asterisk. She played it without an orchestra because there was no orchestra. She played the piano part alone in the empty hall, and the orchestral lines lived in her left hand, the way they had lived there since 1985, when she had first learned the piece in a practice room in Moscow, with Stefan reading a book on the floor beside her. The Bersendorfer remembered everything. The middle C held. The repaired felt held. The 30 extra years in her body did not slow her hands. They slowed her phrasing, which was now richer than it had been in the recording of 1986. Slower, more patient. The work of a woman who had learned, in her 30 years away from the stage, what it meant for a phrase to take its time. 8 minutes into the intermezzo, Albrecht walked very quietly to the front row and sat down. He did not want to disturb her. He sat with his hands folded in his lap and his face wet, and he listened. Vosberg did not move. The journalist with the camera filmed everything. The journalist with the recorder began, at some point in the 7th minute, to cry silently into her own sleeve. When Clara finished, 12 minutes later, on the last sustained chord that the intermezzo holds for 4 full beats, she did not lift her hands from the keys immediately. She let the chord ring out into the hall. She let the 1869 acoustic do what it had been built to do. Then she lifted her hands. She placed them, palms down, on the closed lid of the piano in front of her. The same gesture the woman of 65 would notice, that she had made at the very beginning alone, before any of this began. What happened in the next 18 hours happened the way these things happen now. The video was on the internet by 3 o'clock in the morning. By 7 o'clock, 3 major Austrian newspapers had it. By 10 o'clock, it was in Switzerland and Germany and France. By noon, the Vienna State Opera House Board had held an emergency meeting and unanimously voted to terminate Maestro Heinrich Vosberg's contract for conduct unbefitting the institution. A phrase that had been used 3 times in the opera house's 155-year history, and never before for a living conductor. By 6 o'clock in the evening, Clara Werner had been formally invited by Albrecht, by the board chair, by the lead violinist of the orchestra, who came to her apartment in person with a small bouquet of white lilies, to be the featured soloist of the Gala, which would broadcast in 4 hours to 40 countries. She said yes. She said yes because Stefan would have wanted her to. She wore, by her own choice, the gray cleaning uniform underneath a black concert shawl. Not as a statement, as a remembering. The uniform was 31 years of a life she had chosen and would not be ashamed of. The shawl was Stefan's mother's, from a closet she had not opened in 28 years. She played the Concerto No. 3 in its entirety. The orchestra, the same musicians who, that morning, had stood up from their chairs when she walked into the rehearsal, played underneath her the way an orchestra plays for someone they have decided, collectively and without discussion, to follow anywhere. When she finished, the hall 2,000 seats, full, broadcasting to 40 countries, stood up. Vosberg watched from a back row seat. He had been allowed in by the board, on Clara's specific request, because Clara had said one sentence to the board chair that morning that the board chair had not been able to refuse. He should be allowed to hear it. He heard it. He sat through all 41 minutes of it. At the end, he stood up with the rest of the hall. He stood up because his hands, for the first time in 55 years, had stopped asking his face for permission. He cried. He cried the way Stefan had cried in Moscow in 1986. He did not know he was crying for the same reason. After the gala, after the standing ovation, after the photographs and the journalists, and the 17 separate offers of management contracts she would politely decline by morning, Clara walked back onto the empty stage. The chandeliers were dimmed to the low amber she knew by heart. The 2,000 seats held the shape of 2,000 bodies. The hall was emptied. She walked to the Bersendorfer. She put her hand on the closed lid. It hummed under her palm. The waiting hum. The pulse so faint you would mistake it for your own, if you didn't know better. She knew better. "Stefan," she said quietly. To the piano. To the empty hall. To the 78 years of a Swiss patron sitting alone in the third row who had pretended, with great delicacy, not to follow her back in. I gave them something they didn't deserve. She smiled. They knew. There is a particular kind of silence a woman learns to live inside when she has chosen to disappear. It is not loneliness. It is a decision made for love and kept for so many years that you forget you were the one who made it. And then one day, in a place you never expected, in front of people you never planned to be seen by, something inside you remembers that you were not built to disappear forever. You were built to be heard. The people who loved you would not want it any other way. If you have ever quietly given up something that was yours, a song, a name, a part of yourself, because the person you wanted to share it with was no longer there to hear it, tell us about it in the comments. Not the giving up. The first moment you remembered. We read everyone.